Hello and welcome to this quick little video around engagement and how to engage our students more in the classroom. So I first wanted to start off, and I might be a bit biased here since I am the literacy coach in the middle school, but I wanted to start off with a little reflection, thinking about what did you read in school? Whose books did you read in school? Who were the authors and who were the characters? Now, if you just think back to either your high school English class or a middle school English class, or even an elementary read aloud, who were your favorite authors? Or just who were the authors that you remember? What kind of stands out to you about your reading experience when you were in school? And then kind of think about why. What was the purpose of reading in school? Was it for a class discussion? Was it for a presentation? Was it for research? Was it for essays? Was it for fun? Was it to share? Who told you to read? Was it your family, your friends, just your teachers? And where did you get these books from? Did you see anyone else around you reading? Your parents, cousins? And when you were reading or you had to read, how did these books make you feel? What do you remember feeling when you read them? Now, these are some of the authors that I remember from high school English and just from school. We have George Orwell, we have Shakespeare, and here are some other authors that really inspired me. We have Harper Lee, we have the incredible Judy Blume, we have Jane Austen. Classics, right? And these authors are very much what some teachers think of as canon. Like students just should be reading their books. These should be the authors that we're modeling. In terms of literature, these authors are very important. Which, for the record, I don't disagree with. Now, I also just want to start a little story sharing about these two young girls here. These two girls grew up in California and they are sisters, and they had very different school experiences. One was highly engaged in school, highly motivated, and traditionally successful. The other was not very engaged in school, but still ended up pretty successful. Now, just looking at this picture, and I'm going to show a few more things. What do you notice? What might make these young women engaged in school? These are some of the authors I mentioned before. What do you notice? What's different? These are some of the other authors I mentioned. None of the authors really look like these young women. Maybe they have similar experiences. Maybe they write about ideas that these young women have. And these authors definitely provide windows into worlds that these young women would not necessarily experience. But they're not necessarily mirrors. Now, with these authors, Isabel Allende, Gabriel Garcia Marquez, we're getting a little familiar, a little closer to being mirrors for these two young women. Now we're getting even closer. We have Tate Keller, we have Grace Lynn, we have Erin Entrada Kelly. And now we're getting a bit of a better representation of both mirrors and windows into different experiences and to different kinds of people. Now, I just wanted to share this story with pictures because these two women, these young girls, I am the younger one, and the older young woman is my sister. And we had very different levels of engagement when we were in school. But something that we really had in common was that we did not see ourselves in the curriculum. There were a lot of windows into other worlds, which we both appreciated. We are both very avid readers. We've always have been. But it wasn't until adulthood and when my sister had her children that we started to see that there were authors of different ethnicities and not just gender and with broad experiences. And then we started to find and see authors and not just characters, but just the fact that authors who look like us and who have similar experiences to us exist was such a revelation for us. And we didn't experience that until adulthood. So now thinking about engagement. We can define student engagement as a meta construct that includes behavioral, emotional, and cognitive engagement. Although there are individual bodies of literature on behavioral, emotional, and cognitive engagement, what makes engagement unique is its potential as a multidimensional or meta construct that includes these three dimensions. Now, this is really important because when we think about engaging our students in classes, it's not just them following the rules where they're compliant. It's not just them feeling comfortable, and it's not just them thinking critically. It needs to be all three of these things all of the time. Now, more specifically, behavioral engagement is what we think of when we think of just participating in school, following the rules, adhering to class norms, and not being disruptive in class. Now, this is where both my sister and I have a very similar experience. Both of us followed the rules. We, didn't act up. We're very respectful to teachers. So that was where we had a very similar experience. Emotional engagement is something that's very important to us here at Stanford, where it's a sense of belonging and feeling important to the school and appreciating success in school. Um, this creates ties to the school and influences students' willingness to work. Now, for myself, I have always loved school and I felt success early on. And so it became very important to me. And so I was emotionally tied and emotionally engaged in school, and I was behaviorally engaged in school. So this is where my sister and I had different experiences because although she was somewhat successful, she didn't appreciate the importance of being successful in school, and she didn't always feel positive relations to teachers. And so she didn't have as much of a willingness to work. And cognitive engagement is being thoughtful, strategic, and just willing to work through difficult classes or difficult subjects for the sake of learning. And this is where we really want to have our students be, is engaging cognitively and becoming critical thinkers, right? But it's difficult to do that. Now, as I was reading about engagement, there were a lot of similarities with motivation. However, motivation and engagement are different. Motivation can be reasons for a given behavior, just like, do I want to do this task? And can I do this task? So that's basically what motivation is. But with engagement, it's really those three main manifestations of behavioral, emotional, and cognitive motivation. So it's like putting all three things together to really be engaged in a task or an activity. So, for the sake of school, the research shows that it's responsive to context, where motivation can kind of be separated from context. Engagement is responsive to variations in that context. And so, when we're thinking of engaging our students and wanting them to be more than just compliant, it's really hard to do because we do want our students to be behaviorally engaged and just follow the rules and be quiet in class when we're talking. But we also want them to participate when we're trying to make jokes, and we want them to laugh. We want them to have rich discussion. We want them to answer questions thoughtfully when we ask them. But how do we do that? How do we get them to the level where behaviorally, emotionally, and cognitively they're engaged? So they're following the rules, they're there, they're doing what they need to do, they're being compliant. They feel comfortable, they feel connected to the work, they see themselves in the work, right? Which is something that both my sister and I struggled with. And finally, because they're comfortable and they're willing to behave, well in class, then they're able to engage cognitively and thoughtfully in the work. How do we do this? So, what do you do? Um, I don't have all the answers, unfortunately. And I think just being an educator, it's a journey to figure out different answers for different students. Um, in our UDL class, there were some options of things that you could do. And so I try to boil them down to things that I feel are both culturally responsive and applicable, but they are very broad, just to put that out there. But I just keep coming back to a couple reflection questions. And the first one is, who are the people in front of me every day? Who are these young people that I see? And not just what are their names, and not just what they're interested in, but where are they coming from? What do they really care about? Who do they really care about? After school, where do they go? What snacks do they like? Why do they like those snacks? Do they bring snack to school? Do they eat lunch in the cafeteria? Who do they eat lunch with? Who are their friends? Are they comfortable talking to people in certain languages as opposed to other languages? Are they comfortable speaking to people at all? Do they have a journal? Who are these people that you see in your class? And not just why, but what are you doing to intentionally design spaces that are engaging and equitable? And it goes beyond just letting them translate into their home language or having a poster in different languages or being nice. It's intentionally designing curriculum and spaces for specifically the people that you see in front of you every day. And it's not about completely changing your units or your lesson plans all the time, but it's kind of tweaking them maybe every day, maybe every week or so, maybe every quarter for the specific people in front of you at that time. And that's hard. And that does take a lot of time and a lot of work. I recognize that. But that's what we need to do to meet the needs of our students. And so I just offer these three really short statements for what to do. How do you really engage your students? And the first one is why I asked that question. Who are the people in front of me every day? Know who's in front of you, and amplify those more quiet voices. What is missing? Who is missing? Whose viewpoint? Whose heart? Whose family? Whose language? Right? And how do I amplify those voices? A lot of times, sometimes it's ask the students and ask yourself, what would have been the best for you or for some people that you knew growing up. And something that one of the articles offered is to ask what, not why. So it's not about asking, why do I have to do this or why must I engage my students, but what steps am I doing to be very intentional to engage my students? And sometimes just asking that question and reflecting on that question can really lead you to some great places. And third, when you're stuck, look around you. You are probably surrounded by incredible educators that you're able to collaborate with. You can co plan, you can co teach, you can co reflect. Just ask. Just ask, what should we do? How are we amplifying those quiet voices? How are we really engaging students? And chances are that the folk around you are wondering the same thing and are willing to at least dive into trying out different strategies to really support our students. Thank you so much for listening. I hope this was helpful. I apologize for not having all the answers, but that is the fun of learning and being an educator, and putting yourself out there. So thank you for doing this work every day, um, and hope that you continue and we can all learn together.